Hi. Welcome to the week, sir, and congratulations on Jubilee.
Thank you,
It's
Pooja.
it's totally gripping. If everything, the dialogues, the way the story moves forward, it's like I binge watched it twice,
Oh,
and I
lovely.
can't wait for for the for 14th April for the second installment to come. Everything from music, and it's amazing. And after a long time, we've got something that is so striking and
Oh,
powerful
thank you.
enough for us to binge watch. Right. Tell us, how did Jubilee come to be? How did the thought come to be? How did you yeah just take me back in time and tell us, how did it come from the idea to execution, please?
So it started as, as an idea. I think this was, 2013, 2014, we were all, working at the Phantom office, and there was and what we had found, there was a bit of a cultural shift, and we were discussing TV series more than we were discussing movies. We were discussing the latest season of Game of Thrones, or the latest season of House of Cards, or Mad Men, or Breaking Bad, and you were finding the fact that there were all these very interesting shows that were being made that were actually making you speak about them more than the movies were. We were all movie geeks, and suddenly we found
Right.
ourselves being TV series geeks. And one of the ideas kind of that went on in the office at that point of time was like, okay, what if we did a series, kind of based on the people behind the golden age of the film industry, and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And that just kind of snowballed. Yeah, that idea was there, and then that became from taking it from one simple idea of that became a bit of a pitch. Okay, how this is how we can do it over a season or over multiple seasons, and then that ends up becoming a a pilot that we wrote, and then Amazon loved it, and then we were just off. So did that.
Right. And I mean, did it come out exactly as you had visualized it? Did it as per what you thought it would look like the first time
No,
when
no,
you
it's
thought about it? Yeah,
it's
the final product.
definitely. No, I'm delighted with the final product. I mean, whether it's exactly as you think, I think there's so much distance between the original thought and where it is right now, that I think it's turned out different. I think it's better than what we had planned, it for. Because
Right.
it's far more layered. I think what Atul Sabharwal has brought to it is a lot more layering, a lot more detailing, a lot more historical context. So much of that's kind of come in, which has just given it more, breadth and depth, and all those things that you would normally get out of a simpler show that's just based on the film industry. And this is on the film industry and more. There's so much more in this
Right.
than
Right.
than just
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much time did it take for the research, for you to really like lock the script, for the research, and because there's so much of context in it. There's so much of background, the cultural context, and it's marvelously, yeah, put
Yeah.
down.
So
So
there's
yeah, can you take
there's
me?
there's stages of research that one does on something like this. There's one is the I think one stage of research is what happens in the story stage, which is partly urban legends. It's partly stories that you as me or Atul or Shomik, as as people who've worked in the industry, have heard over the years, and little urban legends that we've heard over the years. Nuggets and little bits of information about how certain directors in the past worked, or story of that actor had to leave that film for that reason, and that happened. And so you're taking urban legends and all these really interesting stories and distilling them into a fictional narrative, saying that, okay, this actor, this producer, this studio, this kind of setup, which so one is that research, so to speak, which is it's more like 20 years of research where you just heard these stories and made something up. Then there is the research that goes into the the documentation of the era, as in, so what was the geopolitical condition around that time, around partition? What were things that were actually happening around that time? Not just in, say, in the refugee camp, for example, or in other places, but also in the world around the film kind of like sphere. What was the stuff that was going on around that time?
Mm.
What was the Russian and American influences that were actually happening around that time? So there is that part of research.
Right.
That goes into the story part of it. And then there is, of course,
Right.
the research that you would do when it actually comes to the design element, where you've got
Right.
costume research and production design research and streets and
Right.
vehicles and buildings and
Right.
facades and, which is closer to shooting. That's the kind of research you do.
Right. Yeah.
Music and, crowds in the streets and what crowds were and traffic and so many, then you go into,
Right.
then there is that level of
Right.
research, which is, so it's in stages. It's like, it's not all at
Right.
one time.
Right, right. And so many stories, I mean, seem as if they were inspired from real life, real life people, real life, like for instance, Roy Talkies could be compared to Bombay Talkies of that era, then there are individuals who could, whose real life stories also we kind of can, so yeah, I mean, was that, uh,
So
yeah,
there
was
is,
that a
I
thought?
think, so the idea was that we create something. That the thing is that because at the time it's a handful of studios, a
Yeah,
handful of stars, a handful of actors that were there, that when you
yeah,
go back, it's like, okay, say,
yeah,
okay, oh, so Jay Khanna, is he like Devanand, but he's also like Raj Kapoor a little bit, and the same goes with, Binod and Madan. He's also like Dilip, but he's also like Ashok Kumar. So there is a sense of like, because your reference points is so little in that era, that
yeah,
there is always a sense of going back and saying it could be one or the other. That
yeah,
is deliberate to the extent that, yes, you want to leave that little bit of a sense of nostalgia, yet creating your own independent world. Um, Bombay Talkies existed. Roy Talkies, of course, didn't. And our, design of Roy Talkies, because we don't even know what Bombay Talkies look like in that era. There's nothing left for us to be able to see of what the studio floor would have looked like, or what the entire. So that it's a fictionalization of what we believe that
right,
the biggest studio of its time in that era would have kind of
yeah,
looked like. So yeah, there's some fact thrown in, there's a lot of fiction thrown in. It's all kind of merged together in this little melting pot to kind of become an homage, become a tribute to, the era.
right, right. One thing that I noticed was that um, I mean the women in Jubilee play mostly supportive or reacting roles. Um, I mean the way it is shown, I somehow felt that it's was it true of for Bollywood of that time, or does it look like a disservice to Bollywood of that time? I mean, what is your take? I thought
In
that
terms of what?
I mean, they could have been more powerful. Their characters could have been more substantial and powerful. They're mostly, reduced to performing very reactive or supporting roles. So the women in Jubilee.
You still have 5 episodes left, so I think that one needs to sort of like finish that. In a sense, yes, if you say that, okay, your two leads in a sense are Vinod and Jay, and Roy is the more powerful person taking the lead. But I mean, in that sense, Sumitra is from a mounting perspective, she is the partner. She's a studio boss. She's somebody who has agency, who is powerful. The story, what it actually ends up happening to her, and she ends up triggering a lot of the sort of stuff that's going to happen. Nilofer, again, someone with agency, someone who does exactly what she wants, when she wants, how she wants. So yeah, I think if you're questioning length of role versus the men, yes, but are we questioning portrayal of characters? Then definitely not.
Right. From Udan in 2010 to Lutera, and then the Sacred Games to Jubilee. How do we put your kind of style, directorial style, and all, and the kind of filmmaking style? Tell us, can we call it a mix of legacy filmmaking with indie filmmaking, something like that? What do you think? And what is your signature style been in all these?
I
I mean,
don't I don't think I have a signature style. I don't think I have a signature anything. I think part of it is because I like to kind of do something different every time, and it's a process of self-discovery, and also just a nice challenge you set yourself up for every time to be able to say, okay, can you go out there and do something different and discover something different about yourself? Also tell a different story in a totally different approach, in a totally different style. So yeah, I think the lack of a signature style is maybe, if anything, what kind of
right.
sets it apart, I guess.
Do you think this is your finest work till date finest directorial work till date? Jubilee.
Uh, mm, yeah, I mean, probably. It's definitely the most accomplished. I don't know about finest. I think again, finest is very difficult to put finest into because again, the context of the film itself also sort of like depends. I mean, Udaan is a much smaller film. Jubilee is a much larger series. So I think within the context of it, yes, but I think it's definitely my most accomplished one in the sense of actually, going out there and something at this scale with multiple characters and where you have to straddle, look and feel and performances and music and songs and the writing and stuff at a much larger scale. So yes, in terms of, I would say it's my most accomplished work, for sure. It's natural for me over 13 years to grow as a director. So yeah, I'm not the same person I was 13 years ago was making what I am. But again, that finest work it's so specific to the material and to the project itself. I mean, I believe
Right. Right.
um I think looking back, I'd say Udaan was a very sort of from the gut kind of approach to it, which worked for
Right.
that film. So in that sense, that was correct. I also always think before this, my most accomplished work was Bhavesh actually more than anything else. I was very proud of the way we did a lot of those setups and the action scenes, and at least in terms of
Right.
what one was trying to say in that film. Yeah, it didn't really work in an overall kind of thing. I was very happy with the way that I had it. Me and my team had actually done that film. But yes, long story short, I feel Jubilee is my most accomplished work so far.
Right. Right. Tell us, just take me through a few the most challenging things that you overcame while shooting Jubilee. Uh, Things that maybe you know may not have happened earlier in your earlier films or something like that. Like, how was this really different, really challenging?
I think,
Because this is different. Yeah.
yeah, no, no. I think the main challenge I think is just being able to say, okay, 10 episodes in 90 days of shoot, with 10 lip sync songs is not easy to pull off from a purely production perspective. So I think that I'm very happy about the fact that I actually pull it off and, got fantastic actors to perform and, each scene is kind of constructed really well and those kind of things. Um, I think, Yeah, I think the challenge here is like when you come from a feature film world and you're used to a certain amount of time to be taken to shoot a feature, you just don't get that much time when you're doing a series. So I think the challenge is always here is being able to have a set that works like clockwork to be able to make sure you're maximizing every minute of every day. And the challenge from a director is always to say, okay, you need to be able to make sure you get the scene. You want to be ambitious and you want to give it scale and you want to give it a sense of like visual and poetry, but at the same point in time, you have to shoot 5 pages of dialogue every single day, come
Right.
what may.
Right.
And I think balancing the two of those is where the challenge kind of comes in. That how do you make sure that you're completing your days? How do you make sure that you're making the days, not leaving any scenes behind, and still accomplishing a sense of artistry along the way. And that's an everyday challenge, but it's a good challenge. It's a challenge that um, I really enjoyed. I relish it. And then there's challenges of being able to, I think uh, talking about a world which most people are not familiar with, and talking about a certain technicality, for example, that people are not won't be familiar with.
Yeah.
Episode 2, when Sumitra, for example, exposes the negative. Now you're talking to a generation
Yeah.
that sometimes not even forget about what an exposing a negative to the light actually means. People haven't even seen a film canister, leave alone.
Yeah. True. 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 I agree.
It's
Yeah.
been almost 20 years since we people have
Yeah.
regularly even shot on film. So um,
True.
I think the challenge of finding a balance between storytelling and educating people in the story
Yeah.
where you're and we've always tried to make it like, okay, character first, story first, drama first, and everything will
Right.
follow.
Right.
And I think that's kind of
Right.
worked in the sense that just finding that balance of saying that if we believe that the character is doing something dramatically wrong or dramatically whatever, then the audience will believe it. And then if you keep that as your sort of primary focus point, then everything kind of falls into place afterwards. Yeah. So I mean, again, just finding that balance has been the challenge in terms of how does one manage that.
Okay. A very famous dialogue which will always stick around will be that the person, the protagonist says a mass hero should be a government mouthpiece. Do you see that even like that was from the 1930s, that the film, in the context in the film, do you see that it's going on even like now that the industry owes and has an onus of furthering the majoritarian narrative, and that you know do you think like that?
I think that's always, in a sense, been the case, or at least that's how I think people would like it to be. I think that sort of extends into, if it's not even about the narrative coming from a policy perspective. It becomes a narrative even coming from a general industry perspective. Is that the industry prefers the majoritarian narrative because it means good business, I think, at the end of the day. So in a sense, for us, yes, we're trying to show the world for what it is, and we're trying to show the political situation over there for what it is. And the irony was the fact for us is the fact that whether you're talking about the little nugget about songs being, uh, a bad influence, it's just that there's a bit of a smile that comes to people today because you're like, how much is changed? How much is not changed?
Yeah,
In that
that's what. Yeah,
kind of sense, yeah.
yeah.
And we're weirdly finding ourselves in very similar ways, but yeah, but that's a much longer discourse, which is going to go off on a bit of a tangent if we get into that.
I'm sure. Tell us about this fantastic casting, because every character is bang on you. It's so relatable. Tell us about Apar Shakti. Tell us about Prasenjit, and yeah, how did you all come to finalize them? And tell us about what any anecdotes that you can share from behind the scenes, like during screen tests or auditions or anything like that.
So we,
Who all did you
Prasenjit and
audition for it or something?
no, so Prasenjit and Aditi, I didn't audition for it. I approached them and sent them the material, and they read it, and we spoke, and all that sort of stuff. Sorry, because I also felt that Prasenjit and Aditi, I wanted to have somebody established, because the two of them need to be established to be able to at least set a sense of a pyramid kind of structure going upwards. Um, Bhamika, Siddhant, and Shakti were all auditioned. Actually,
Yeah.
everybody after that was all auditioned except for Ram Kapoor. He was the other guy who I just picked up the phone and said, "Yeah, I'm sending you
Okay.
something." He's like, "I'm doing it." I'm
Okay.
like, "I just read the material." He's like, "I'm doing it." I'm like, "You'll have to go
Okay.
bald and you'll have to be really dirty." He's like, "I'm doing it." I'm like, fine, okay, fine, whatever. Um, Siddhant, Apar, and Vamika they were all auditioned by Casting Bay with Anmol, my casting director. And I thought the casting actually across the board, like besides those three, whether it's Arun Govil or Sukma Nilamba, I thought was phenomenal, or Shweta, or Alok Arora, or any of the minor casting, even down to the cobbler, who's fantastic. Um, all are casting directors. But these three were interesting because Siddhant, again, fantastic audition. I was like, who is this guy? Where has he been? Saw his audition multiple times, auditioned him multiple times. Um, Went in and met him, spoke to him, realized. Apar's
Yeah.
audition, I was not expecting. And I told Anmol, I said, if you had told me that you were auditioning Apar Shakti, and if you'd asked me that should I audition Apar Shakti, I would have felt, you mad? What's wrong with you? That guy's never going to be able to do it. I think the fact that Anmol kind of like slid it in there, very, very like
Right. Right.
that, and I saw it, and I was really blown away. I thought this guy was, really incredible audition that he had done.
Right.
Um, Vamika was interesting because Vamika auditioned. I thought it was a good audition, but I didn't think I was like, okay, let me go with somebody else. And 2020, when we were doing the show the first time around, I was actually going with somebody else. Then lockdown happened, and then ironically enough, because of lockdown, um, I had to join Instagram. I wasn't on Instagram before that. I had to actually join Instagram to get in lockdown because
Okay.
people are doing all the Instagram live videos and stuff like that now. And
Yeah.
I discovered Vamika's Instagram. I found that she's such a
Acha.
funny
Wow.
person. Everything she does is really
Yeah.
funny. And suddenly it struck me. I'm like, okay, Nilofer, who we're seeing as, at least on paper, as a character who's very poised and beautiful and gorgeous, but actually somebody who actually has a wicked sense of humor in the back and can really be
Mm.
silly, at times. And I thought that
Yeah.
that gave her such
Yeah.
an interesting personality that,
Yeah.
I went back to the auditions, I looked at them all over again, I met her again, and then I was like, okay, fine, she's actually the one, because I wanted to bring some of that personality out, and which is what we've done. A lot
Mm.
of the places, there's a certain amount of like silliness to the way certain things are being done, which I think she
Mm.
brought to the table, which is really fantastic. Yeah. So it's been a process, I think, because we went through it. They all had multiple
Right.
look tests and multiple screen tests, and I would actually do the auditions myself the second time to see how I can, direct them, because I wanted to be completely sure of those things. But I mean, they're all amazing, I
Right.
think, and
The
like honestly, hats off to my casting director. They did a great job.
Yeah, I'm sure because everyone seriously they are the characters that they portray. Do you think this would have been a good successful film? I mean, you had already imagined this had to be a like a series or
It had
what?
to be
Did
a
you think
series. It couldn't be a film. No, it couldn't be a
couldn't
film.
be
It
because it's
because
a long form
it's
no story.
the long format. Also, it was designed as a series. So it wasn't like lots of times what happens is that you
Acha.
have sometimes you think of a film and then because of times, which I think this one was
Hmm.
very specifically said, no, it needs to be a series. So we already approached it with a far more detailed,
Right.
approach to the characters. And I think the layers that the characters end up getting by the time you're done with episode 1 to episode 10, I think those layers that
Right.
one ends up taking them through, that churn is always, much nicer than in a film. You have to be. It's always going to be a three-act film, and every character will have to sort of like play
Yeah.
their roles in a three-act structure. You're limited to the number of characters you can have. You can't
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
go in depth and create multiple arcs and narratives and stuff. So, I definitely think
Absolutely.
no. I never thought it was a film. It's always a series.
Right. Right. My last
Although I'd love to
question.
see it on
How
screen. I
much of
mean, yeah, but yeah,
yeah.
but
Yeah, I mean, and that's what, yeah, that thought came into my mind, like, to see it on the big screen. But of course, we like nothing should be constricted, the character arc and everything we wanted to be like this only. But then, yeah, because of the time, I don't think it would have been possible. But this is best, seriously. It's easier to binge watch it on the phone and then I watch it how many times ever you want. And so, yeah, just my last question. If we were to put this, in today's scenario, what all do you think has not changed? There are so many things in the aspect of filmmaking, studio systems, and, the entire politics around filmmaking and stuff. What all has remained unchanged? Yeah.
um, honestly, nothing. I don't think if you actually put it in today's context, nothing really has changed. I think everybody's always looking at the idea of being able to mount a star. We're always looking for a star. Everybody's looking for a star all the time. I think that's where the start actually comes from a studio boss basically saying, "Ke star aise roz nahi milte." You know what I mean? Like the whole idea of do that. And it's even today, if you think about it, take Ranveer Singh's launch in 2010, right? The fact that he's today Ranveer Singh and a massive star, but when he was launched, he was a newcomer being launched opposite an already established movie star in a film by Yashraj Studios, which was produced by Aditya Chopra. You take Ranveer Singh out of the equation and put some other actor there, Bittu Sehgal would still have been a hero. That star would still have been launched,
Yeah.
whether it
Yeah.
was Ranveer Singh or somebody else. That
Yeah.
character would have played that film, in that time would have been launched and sort of like done something. Or whether it's the kids from Student of the Year, or whether it's any, these examples of when you take a big producer who's going to go out there and launch somebody, and you're launching a star. That still happens today, so that hasn't changed. So you take that same context. Yes, you're taking partition out of the equation. But the fact that somebody's coming from the bottom to sort of fight their way to the top, or somebody's at the top trying to protect their place and trying to create that concept, all those things are still there today. Nothing has changed in the
Right.
industry from that perspective.
Right.
So yeah, you could easily place the same thing today and it would still work.
Right. And the star actor equation, does that remain the same or not? Because is it still difficult to get actors into being stars and stars into to really come down and be real actors? Is it's
You know,
difficult to find that?
I look. I think there's varying I guess grades or varying stages of what you can call an actor and what you can call a star. But I believe that nobody can be a star without being an actor first. Quite honestly, it's only because you've convinced people, and people have fallen in love with you and they've fallen in love with what you portray on screen. Now, whether you're acting is good or not, that takes talent. That the fact that someone love you on a screen
Right.
takes a certain amount of acting talent anyway. So yes, you have to be an actor to be a star in the first place.
Right.
And then it's just a question
Absolutely.
of how good you are at that.
Right. Then you can go up the hierarchy. But the hierarchy
Exactly.
still remains in place. It's never like it's
There'll always be the A plus, matlab the
yeah.
cream of the
Yeah.
cream, the ones who just will be
Yeah.
able to command much more love than the
Yeah.
ones below that, and the ones below that, and the ones
Yeah.
below that. That hasn't changed either. That's always also going to be. That was the same back then. It's the same right now. So they'll still say the same. I mean, because I guess maybe your love is limited to sort of saying, okay, we will love 5 superstars. It cannot be
Right.
20. Maybe.
Right. That's true. That's true. That's true. All right. On that note, sir, thank you so much for talking to the week. We
Thank you, Pooja.
totally love Jubilee.
Thank you,
Seriously,
Pooja.
very nice. From music to characters to dialogues, which is so important and which we don't find it, in
Yeah,
many movies now. Real
I agree.
punchy, good dialogues.
I
Thank
agree.
you. Thank you.